The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're coming to you live from the Warner Center in Woodland Hills, California. It is Wednesday, May 21st? Thrilled to be here with you guys. Maybe it's the 22nd, I'm not sure. Thrilled to be here with you. You know that on Wednesdays, my favorite thing is when we have Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh here with us, and especially when we have her live. I gotta be honest with you, we do not have her live today, but we're gonna play one of the oldies but goodies. So you're still gonna see Dr. Granpeesheh answering questions. It just is, that portion of the show is not gonna be live today. I've just returned from being away, and she is away at the moment. And you know, we always say here that if families need her and if she needs to be someplace where there are kiddos or something about our kiddos, then we sort of suck it up for the day. But you're still going to see a great episode, and I'm going to be able to monitor live. One of the things that's most frustrating to me is when you guys are writing in questions, a lot of times I don't get to answer them till later because I can't walk, talk, and chew gum at the same time. I'm not a good multitasker, but the great thing about running an episode that we've seen before is that I can continue to chat with you guys. So I will be here live talking with you guys as you write in. I so appreciate you being here, and you're going to love this episode of Ask Dr. Doreen. But before we go to that, I want to talk about the ways that you can connect with us, and Traven's going to show you some of the different ways that you can watch the show, some of the different ways that you can write into us your thoughts, your feelings, your concerns, your questions. I always like to remind you that our homepage is autism-live.com. And when you go there, please feel free to register to be on our mailing list. That pop-up will come up. And if you do, you get the postcard at the beginning of the week that tells you who's going to be on the show for the week. And that's kind of cool thing. We don't spam you. We don't sell the list. So just know that. And there's a chat at the bottom that you can chat with us right directly from the website. It's completely anonymous, completely free. I don't even know where you are or who you are. So if you're asking about resources, please tell us what the closest major city is so that we can speak intelligently to what resources are available to you. Yes? Okay. We appreciate you guys being here. We are going to the recorded version, but please be with us tomorrow when we are live with Matt Asner and Nava Paskowitz Asner. And they're going to be talking about some really important announcements they have for the Ed Asner Family Center for Excellence, I think is the total name of that. Might have it wrong. They'll correct me. And they've got an amazing poker tournament coming up in just a week. And we're going to be covering that live with all the superstars. It's in a really interesting location. I'm sort of way excited, Twitter-pated about the fact, because we're on the back lot in the actual studio where the Mary Tyler Moore show was shot. Stop, right? That in and of itself is going to be exciting, but really looking forward to being there, raising money for this amazing organization and being there with all those stars. But we will check this episode out, and know that we will be back live tomorrow with Matt and Nava, and then we've got great guests on Friday. We're going to be talking about that new documentary, Autism Goes to College. So you're not going to want to miss that on Friday with Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. But first, here it is, Ask Dr. Doreen.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is the
Dr. Doreen is an expert in autism.
Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is a visionary in the field of autism. Now you can ask her questions on Ask Dr. Doreen.
Welcome to Ask Dr. Doreen. We're really excited because I'm here and Dr. Doreen Grandpichet is here, and that
It's so
hasn't
good to
been
be
for
back.
like a month, the two of
That's
us
right,
together.
that's right. It was Nancy and I last week,
Yes.
and we definitely missed you, as always.
Well, and Jem and I got to watch some of it as we were having
that's sweet.
guacamole in San Antonio. We had you
Nice.
guys on the table, and when the Wi-Fi was working, we were able to listen in, and it was
Sweet.
it was exciting and also nerve-wracking. It was like they're there, they're doing it without me. I kind of want to be there. I enjoy guacamole during during Ask Dr. Doreen, but you know it's better to be here. So, and it looked like it was really fun and exciting. It always is, and I want to remind folks that if they have never seen you before, that you are an amazing expert in the
Thank
field
you
of
so much.
autism
That's
and
so
a
kind of you.
visionary and somebody who has been treating individuals with autism for more than 30 years at this point. And that you are an amazing individual. And
Thank you very much.
I'm always excited to be here, and I know that our viewers are too. We do want to remind everybody that there is no expert that can give individual specific advice
right.
in this format. That's not what the intention of this program is. The intention is for you to be able to write in your questions and have an expert give you information that can help you to go back to the experts that are closer to you and ask better questions and get better information, and
That's right.
you're wonderful at that.
Oh,
So
thank you very much.
can I leap right in?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we had a question that came in. How do you deal with a high-functioning 17-year-old who gets angry and then becomes aggressive?
Right. And you know, there's really no short answer to this, but we'll do our best here. The key to any kind of challenging behavior, as I've said many times on this show, is basically figuring out what is causing the behavior. It's not, you know, when ABA first developed, we would have just had some various techniques to apply, but really, unless you know why the individual is getting angry and becoming aggressive, you could very easily make a mistake and do the wrong intervention. So it starts with, what's the function of the behavior? It always does. What is the function? So the question to ask is, what makes him angry? Let's assume he always becomes aggressive when he's angry, and then the question becomes, what makes him angry? And I've always said, most of our kids, in 99.9% of the cases, all of these aggressive types of behaviors are sort of a side effect of autism. It's because the individual can't communicate. And because they can't communicate, they become angry. In fact, it's true of us. If you think about it, Shannon, like if you have a frustrating conversation with someone and you feel like you cannot communicate with them because it's just not getting through, you get angry, right? And when you get angry, people do different types of things. Obviously, we don't get aggressive in most cases. Some people still do, but in most cases, you don't get aggressive physically. At least you might get verbally aggressive or something like that. But the question really becomes, the way to fix that is to make sure that that aggression doesn't work, but you are given a different way to communicate that does work. And so for this individual, I don't know what the things are. First thing you would have to do is a functional behavior assessment, and that's an FBA. And that asks a bunch of questions. You could do an indirect FBA. The way to do that, you can go on skills, and there's a part called CIFA, which stands for Card Indirect Functional Assessment, CIFA. And it's just a series of questions about the behavior. It'll say, you know, what are the types of things that get him angry and he aggresses? Like, what scenarios, what situations? And you answer those, and it helps you identify if the individual is trying to get access to a tangible object, if they're trying to gain attention, if they're trying to escape from a demand. You know, what is the function of the behavior? And once you understand that, then that gives you links to this other thing called the BIP Builder, Behavior Intervention Plan. And that gives you all the possible ways that you can intervene. So if, for instance, an individual gets aggressive because you've asked them to do something, they don't want to do it, that is trying to escape a demand. And then the short answer is you must figure out a way to make them do it. But if you can't do that when they aggress, you don't let them out of the demand. That's really, really important. If the individual is aggressing and you back off, you know what they're learning is, oh, every time I want somebody to back off, I'm going to get aggressive. And that's just the reality of it. So, you know, all of these things are very easy to deal with, but, you know, having a 17-year-old, and your 17-year-old is high functioning. Again, people define that differently, so I don't know exactly what that means, but he should not have, it'll be easier dealing with an individual who's high functioning in some ways because he'll understand these rules. And in some ways, individuals who are high functioning are very smart and they can manipulate the situation a little bit more, so it might be harder in that sense. But please don't give up. Go to another very good resource for you in addition to, you know, the easiest thing is to do the CIFA and the BIP. Very easy, you can do that. But if you really have the time, and I really recommend that you educate yourself on the basics of ABA, go to IBT website, which is the Institute for Behavioral Training, which is ibehavioraltraining.com. On there, you can just go and get a module on challenging behaviors, and there's several that you can choose from, and they're very short, very inexpensive, $10 or so, and they will really, really help you understand all this stuff that I just said in a much more detailed and cohesive way.
And now that you've given that brilliant description, I just want to tell you what goes on in my head.
Sure.
Because I always try to come up with little songs to help me to remember stuff. And I don't know if everybody, you might be too young to remember, but there was a thing called Schoolhouse Rock, and then it had a resurgence. There was one the song that they would sing, Conjunction Junction, What's Your Function?
Yeah.
And I once we started ABA, I changed that in my head to, you know, function, what's the function?
Yeah.
To remember that every behavior had a function, because
Absolutely.
you get emotional.
Oh, of course.
When your kid is hitting you, and I certainly had my little kid hitting me. I didn't have a 17-year-old hitting me, but I had emotions about that. You bring things with you into the relationship, and I was not okay with being hit. And so he would start hitting, and a whole lot of things would happen in my mind, so that I wasn't in any way prepared to deal with what was happening. When people described to me and said, okay, that is behavior that's happening, and it is communicating something, and it has a paycheck, that's whatever the paycheck is the function of it, that helped me to get like a little bit pulled away from the emotion of it.
Right.
The guilt and the shame and just all the uncomfortable that came with it. And for me, that was important. And we're not trained to think of behavior as function. But whenever I would see something that was weird, I would start singing the song, function, what's the function?
Absolutely.
Which helped me a lot. But so you can overcome these things.
Absolutely.
But you got to learn.
You have to. That's
what it is.
It's such an important point you make, Shannon, because when a behavior happens, it's not like we're just sitting and observing it and mentally calm and can be like, oh, I wonder what the function of this is. We get sucked into it, and we're like, he's becoming aggressive. How do I handle this right away? And your adrenaline goes up, and you start not thinking straight, and all that.
And you start time leaping. You like start picturing catastrophic things happening, like them being in jail.
Oh yeah.
You being dead and your child being in jail.
Oh my
Like
gosh.
I can go there in 3 seconds when something happens, right? And then you are not prepared to do anything that's
reasonable
in any way. Yeah.
Yeah, that, or even, you just can't think. You start behaving wrong as well.
Yeah.
And so being able, and it's not just, also it's very important for our viewers who, it's not just about aggression. We're talking about any kind of behavior. We're not talking about challenging. It doesn't have to be that severe of behavior. It could just simply be something as simple as, let's say you have a teenager who complains all the time.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what it is. You look at that behavior and you wonder, what's my role? What should I be doing with this? And if you can identify the function, if you can figure out what it is this individual is trying to get across to you, what's the reason for this? If they could communicate better, how would they be vocalizing it? That's what I always ask. If they could talk, what would they say? And if you can figure that out, then what you do is you make it easier for them to gain access to whatever it is they're seeking by doing something appropriate rather than inappropriate.
And it's the keys to the kingdom. I always think about, for our 10th wedding anniversary, we went to Vegas. and we brought Jem. He goes on our, he's like, where are we going for our next anniversary? And we went to see Mystere, the Cirque du Soleil
So nice,
Mystere.
yeah.
And we were excited to be there, and they had told us come early. There's a pre-show. If you're available, come for the pre-show. They have a clown who comes out and does stuff. So there were probably 100 people in the audience for the pre-show, but there was a family that was in the next section down from us. They had to have paid a small fortune for their tickets.
Right.
Because ours weren't cheap. And it was a mom and a dad who were not young mom and dad, and they
Right.
had an adult daughter who was in a wheelchair and who was nonverbal.
Right.
And 2 minutes into the pre-show, the daughter started making noises that were really uncomfortable for everybody to listen to. And they were trying to quiet her, and it wasn't working. And I could tell that they were so aware of all of our eyes on them. And then when that wasn't getting their attention, she began to strike out and try to hit them.
Yeah.
And I sat there, it was like watching a car accident in slow motion. I felt so bad for this family, but you don't want to interrupt, you don't want to intervene, you don't want to do anything. And Jem, of course, was starting to get agitated, and I was trying to distract him, and now the poor clown
Oh
was
my
trying
gosh.
to deal with all this stuff, right? It's a car accident. Well, eventually, they got so flustered that
They
they said, okay, we're going to get up and leave. And the minute they stood up to leave, she was
stopped.
happy because she needed to go to the bathroom.
Oh my gosh.
And it was so evident to me that that's all she wanted was to get up and go to the bathroom, but she didn't have the means of communicating it. And I know that they took her to the bathroom, but then they did not come back in because they didn't want a chance that she was going to have. And I just thought, oh, that missed thing of all she wanted was to go to the bathroom. And then they could have come back and very likely have watched the whole show. But I knew that those parents were in this moment. At that time, this was many years ago. This was 5 years ago. I didn't feel empowered. Now, I would have gone up to them in the bathroom and said, please come back.
Yeah.
Please come back and watch the show.
That's very nice.
But I didn't
Yeah.
then, but I would
No,
now.
but I understand what you're saying, and the thing for me is, a lot of times you can imagine how many times I want to intervene in the environment when I see things, but I don't, because people are at different stages in their lives. Sometimes if it's very easy, I will, but a lot of times I feel bad. But having said that, this is why at CARD, for me, it has always been so important to do skill teaching in addition to behavior management, because you can easily, prevent a behavior, but unless the individual has the ability to communicate, it's just going to happen in some other form of behavior, because how else is she going to communicate? I really need to go right now. No one's getting it. I either have to wet myself or I have to tantrum.
Yes.
How else am I going to communicate?
Yes.
So this is the thing that is so important for me, for every child, every adult, that's why I always say I love working with adults, because it's so easy. All you do is teach them a means to communicate, whether it's a PECS program or some kind of iconic program, or even verbal that no one's tested. And as soon as they can communicate, they just immediately, a lot of behaviors subside, because all they were trying to do was say, hey, this is unfair. This is not right. Like, I need something.
Yes, and that it could have easily been rectified. But I know for those parents, their entire evening was wrecked.
I know.
And they didn't get to see this beautiful show.
I
and
know.
she didn't get to see this beautiful show.
Yes.
And I still mourn it. It's 5 years later, and I'm mourning it for them because I get it. But in any case, we can educate ourselves about these things. You just gave us the crash course on it, but when you want more information, IBT, ibehavioraltraining.com, and of course, skillsforautism.com. We're going to take a break, and then we're going to be back with more of your questions for Dr. Granpeesheh. You can still be writing them in on our Facebook or our YouTube Live or on our homepage, autism-live.com. Stick with us. Bye-bye.
Welcome to Smarty. This month, we're going to be making our own chore spin wheel. You'll notice when we make this fun activity, these icons are going to be popping up onto the screen. These correlate to specific skill sets that are in the Skills program. Skills is the ABA-based online tool that helps parents build their own teaching plan for children on the autism spectrum. If you are a Skills user, this will help you get the most out of this educational opportunity. Well, let's get started. The materials you'll be needing are a large bowl to trace, cardstock, scissors, a pencil, a ruler, a hole puncher, a metal brad, and any other arts and crafts materials you want to use to decorate your pinwheel with. So step 1, you're going to take your large bowl and place it on top of the cardstock and trace the circle. Step 2, you guessed it, you're going to take your scissors and you're going to cut along the line. Step 3, you're going to fold the circle into quarters. This is the best way to make sure all the triangles within it are symmetrical. Once you fold the paper, you're going to take your ruler and you're going to trace those lines so you can actually see them on the circle. Now here comes the fun part. Take your arts and crafts materials and you're going to decorate the chore spin wheel. I use some crayons to color in every other quadrant so you could see them pop and see the difference between the different chores. Place the different adaptive skills your child is working on in the different quadrants. Once you're done decorating the circle and labeling the different chores in each quadrant, then you're going to take your scrap paper that you had left over and you're going to cut an arrow out of it. Once the arrow has been cut, you're going to take your hole puncher and hole punch on the very edge of it. This will be your spinner. Then you're going to take your arrow and your circle and line them up and take your brad and place it through and secure it. And voila, you have your finished chore spin wheel. Well, I enjoyed making this activity with you and I hope to see you soon. Until next time, guys, craft on! To find more about skills and to access all of the lessons you saw in today's Smarty, visit skillsforautism.com and click on the parents icon. Skills, the online autism solution.
Being part of this community is really important to a mom with a son like Jackson, because it really does take a village, and you need so much support, you know, to help bring out all of the amazing qualities and skills and talents that our children have. So I'm just very grateful to everybody who was a part of this.
I think it helps with all sorts of that, self-esteem, social skills. They seem to communicate a little bit with each other, and they had a lot of friends. The helpers were phenomenal, and I think the social skills for sure, because they, you know, they worked together and they did a couple of group things across the floor, and they sang songs together, and I yeah, for sure, I think it's a really huge deal. A great program.
What programs like this show is the person is in front of what we call today a disorder. I think what we're finding is that these sorts of brain challenges that make people unique can actually be gifts in ways we haven't discovered in the rest of society to bring them out. So when you see a program like this and you see the kids dancing, having fun, and making up jokes, making up the story. I was here when they did that. That was so amazing to watch, because they were all focused, they were all present, they were all laughing, they were all getting into the creation of this story. And that to me sort of broke the barrier to say, no, first we're dealing with people, and then we're dealing with the challenges.
Welcome back to Autism Live and to Ask Dr. Doreen. We're here with Dr. Doreen Granpeche, and she's answering your questions in real time. I want to take a question that had come in last week but came in a little bit later, that's very specific about, do you have a spot in Plymouth, Massachusetts? And they're asking specifically, is your staff stable, good benefits, lots of input, etc.? And I think when they say spot, I think they're literally asking, is there a spot for a child? I think a lot of times this sounds to me, and help me if I'm wrong here, but this sounds to me like a parent who's about to move from one ABA provider and wants to know that they have a place to jump to.
Yeah.
Because you do have offices in Plymouth, Woburn, that's close, is it not?
Yeah, it is close, and I don't know. We actually had a site in Plymouth. I know that we had to move the site because a few years ago we opened in Plymouth, and then we had to close that site and open up in Woburn. But then I heard that we got so many more families back in Plymouth that we ended up going back as well to Plymouth. So I'm not actually sure. We might have a physical location in Plymouth. And the best way to do this, I think, is to go on our website. It's like we're past 165 sites now. I just don't know all the cities. If you could go on our website, centerforautism.com, and go to locations, and it's pretty updated, so it'll list all the locations, and there's a phone number and there's an email for every site. Call that site and say, if not Plymouth, find the next city that's closer to you, and call them and say, I have a child, I'd like to come in, are you open? Most of our sites are still taking in patients. I can't really say, I don't allow wait lists anymore, Shannon, so it puts a ton of pressure on my staff, but we do our best to take every child in within 6 month period if we can. So contact the office and see what their status is. To answer your question, we're pretty stable. We always have, the problem with incoming staff or new therapists is that when they come in, we at CARD, I don't know what other agencies don't really do this, but we train them quite a bit before they get out there. Sometimes they make it through training, sometimes they don't. We lose some therapists in the first 90 days because they just don't pass training or they're just not good enough. And we can't hire fast enough. We are hiring roughly 60 or so people per week, which is pretty crazy if you think about it. And but we do lose about a quarter of these people, or maybe a third of these people in their first 90 days, and the rest in their first year, which I think those that we lose in the first year are the people that are thinking this job really isn't for me, because there's a lot of driving involved. There's a lot of, maybe some of our kids or adults are aggressive. It's not an easy job. So aside from that, yeah, we have 100% benefits. We have all kinds of benefits for our staff, including health insurance and everything else. And we have amazing supervision. We are pretty well known for our incredible supervision. We do provide all free continuing education to all our staff all the time for them to maintain their credentials. We are more or less we're incentivizing our staff very, very highly. They get pay raises if they become a board certified autism technician, or if they become a registered behavior technician. They also have the ability to study become an expert in like behavior management, or let's say visual programming or different types of programs, and then they will get additional pay for that as well. And so we do all kinds of stuff to keep our therapists motivated, and they have a career path here. They can start from a therapist position and go all the way up to supervisor, and we do support education and all sorts of stuff. So yeah, please do contact the office at Plymouth or any other office that's nearby. And
I have the list if we want to go over it. So Stoughton, there's Woburn, Worcester is providing services but doesn't have a center yet, and Yarmouth.
Okay, Yarmouth is the one, I guess that's going to be pretty close.
Okay, so those are the 4 places in Massachusetts right now.
Great, thank you.
Fabulous. Okay, and since you brought up the RBT, somebody wrote in and said, I'm from Bangladesh, and how can I get RBA training course online?
Well, we have the training course online, so you can go to the Institute for Behavior Training, ibehavioraltraining.com. ibehavioraltraining.com. If you just go there, they have an RBT course, but aside from the course, you're going to need supervision in order to become an RBT, and there's a whole package on the IBT website, and they can tell you more about that, and I believe they or we are still providing supervision online. So, but I don't know if all of the supervision can be done online, so you should probably read up on it on the IBT website.
There you go. We look forward to having another RBT in Bangladesh.
In Bangladesh. The other thing for you to consider, if the RBT becomes difficult, is to actually do the BCAT, the Board Certified Autism Technician. They're pretty equivalent here in the United States. We get funding for both, so equally. So any agency that gives us funding for RBT will also give us funding for BCAT. And that is maybe a little bit, the requirements for it might be a little bit easier, and it is completely focused on autism as opposed to just general ABA. It's a very autism-specific credential.
There you go. We had a question come in on Facebook. Ash writes in, why does my 3-year-old gain a skill and over time stop practicing that skill? Be it washing hands, peeing in the potty, drinking from a glass. He is so resistant in all chores.
Okay, that's a really good question. So the only thing I can think of to answer that is that there's probably 2 reasons that we stop doing things. One is that we don't continue to be reinforced by them. And you realize, of course, that when you first, okay, so let's say a child learns to wash their hands, and that behavior is reinforced by lots of people cheering, him getting a specific reward for it, or whatever the reinforcers are. They're reinforcers that are not really built into the activity itself. For us, the reinforcer for washing hands is the avoidance of germs. But for a child, you have to keep reminding them, wash your hands, because they don't have that reinforcer yet, and they can't conceive of how important it is to avoid germs. So it's a meaningless thing to them. So for the child, it's just a matter of saying, good job, look, you washed your hands, that's terrific. Now, if you get rid of that too fast, if you don't maintain that behavior well, in other words, if the child doesn't receive reinforcers, then it'll go away. Any behavior will extinguish eventually if you don't fade off your reinforcers gradually and make sure that there are still environmental reinforcers in place. So until the child understands the benefits of washing hands and starts to become intrinsically rewarded for washing hands, they're going to depend on your reinforcers. Now, you don't have to reinforce every single time. In fact, don't, because continuous reinforcement tends to extinguish faster. You know, if I reward you every single time and then I stop, you're going to stop doing the behavior right away. But if I reward you occasionally and you can't predict when I'm going to reward you, your behavior will continue. So you need to get to that schedule of reinforcement. That means you need to maintain, you need to reward, and then start doing it on a variable schedule so that your child can't predict when exactly. Sometimes reward on the 2nd turn, the 3rd, the 5th, just do a variable schedule.
We call it the slot machine because you don't know when it's going to hit the jackpot. You put the quarters in and you're going to get a reward at some point, but you don't know how big and you don't know what it's going to be.
That's exactly right. And that behavior, as we all know, never extinguishes. Because the person, we keep trying, right? We never know when the reward's coming.
Yeah.
So that's one reason that your child may be stopping these things. The other reason is someone's doing it for them. So you learn to wash your hands, but then someone else comes and starts doing all your chores for you, and you learn, hey, someone's going to do my chores, so I don't need to do them anymore.
Right. Man, I want that. I want somebody to come after me and do my chores. All right, we're going to take a short break, and then we're going to be back with more of your questions for Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh. Stick with us.
Potty training is different for every child. A child could come in with absolutely, no control over their bladder, and as long as that's not a medical issue, then we can certainly approach it behaviorally and give them the tools they need to be successful, just like any other skill that we would teach.
Well, we think he's learning to pee on the potty. No big successes yet and lots of accidents. Here is the laundry from today.
For some of our kids takes, just a couple days. And then for other kids, it can take months and months and months. And then when you're looking at complete independence, it can take years.
Hey, you have to go pee-pee?
There's a lot of different ways to tell if a child is ready. We look for a couple different things. Probably the most important is parents saying, I need this to happen, I'm ready. Second is, a child showing interest in the bathroom, and some of it is simply age. It's time to go ahead and work on this.
You're pooping?
You first start with teaching the child what they need to do on the toilet. The basic thing we want is for them to drink as much liquid as possible. It's inevitable that if you drink a bunch of liquid, you're gonna pee.
No, I can't help you pee. I can hold your hand, but I can't help you pee.
Ultimately, what we want is that, the child, as soon as they're put on the toilet, they urinate. So that's step one. Step two is usually working through the amount of time that they're off of the toilet and making sure that they're not having accidents during the time that they're off. So this is kind of the bladder control stage of things.
So the purpose of the potty log is just to see how long it takes them as soon as they sit on the potty for them to actually urinate, and the amount of time that he's able to hold his urine. And with the log, we're able to visually see how long it takes them each time, and if they have accidents or not. He's on a half-hour potty schedule, so if he doesn't go when we take him, then we have to take him in 10 more minutes. So every 10-minute intervals until he does go, and then we reset the clock, and it's 30 minutes again.
Okay, buddy. Okay, last chance to go pee-pees. Do we reset it for 10?
Oh, what does that mean? What does that mean, Jack? It's potty time. We can come play after. Hurry.
What we hope happens in this time is that the kids will learn how to initiate going to the bathroom on their own. This is oftentimes the hardest part of potty training, is because they get so used to somebody telling them when they need to go that they're not really recognizing the signs just in their own body of when they need to go.
Uh-oh, he wet himself.
Uh-oh. Big wet?
Was it a lot? We can reset to half an hour now.
The biggest thing for parents is not to give up. The other big tip, and I think pitfall that a lot of parents fall into, is putting their children back into pull-ups or diapers, especially if they're starting to have accidents. And this is probably the worst thing that you can do. They need to recognize that feeling of fullness in their bladder and take themselves to the bathroom, or tell an adult that they need to go to the bathroom.
What do you have to do? You have to put your pee-pee in the potty. Okay, give it a shot. See if you can put it in there. There you go. You're doing it. Yay, Jack. Hey, pray for your pee-pee.
Big girl pee-pees.
Woo! Yay! Good job. What a big boy. High five, high five, high five, high five, high five, high five, high five.
Welcome back to Autism Live and to Ask Dr. Doreen. We are here with Dr. Doreen Grampichet, and she's answering your questions in real time. This is a question that I really want to get to. Please help. I have spoiled my son his entire life. He's 10, and we just received the diagnosis of ASD level 1. He has many electronics that he feels he can use whenever he wants, and has terrible tantrums when we try to take them away, usually after a tantrum or limit them in any way. We made a routine for him to follow. It's mostly fun stuff with just brush teeth, get on pajamas, and go to bed as the only must-dos. The rest is play and electronics, and he still refuses to follow it even with rewards. We are permissive parents, and I think that has played a role in his defiant behavior. But how can we start to turn it around? He has a lot of issues with following directions at school as well. He basically just wants to play on his electronics and avoid anything he doesn't like. Is it possible to reverse his behaviors? I just want to say I'm really proud of this parent.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, what a wonderful thing to write in, and when you admit, okay, we might have done this in a way that set things up, it means you're really on the cusp of beginning to understand how powerful you are.
Yes.
And that, you know, I think this is the best possible place that you can be in to start turning things around.
Absolutely.
So we sit at your feet. Welcome to here.
Absolutely. It's amazing. Good for you. And on that note, so to answer your question, it's absolutely possible. There's no question. But because these behaviors have been ingrained for 10 years, it's not easy. So let's be very clear about that. The best way to do this, to make it easiest on you guys, all of you, your child and you is for you to get really well trained. Because, and I will give you advice right now a little bit, but it's not going to be enough. Because every time I tell you to do something, he's going to do something else, and you're going to give in, and it's going to delay things, it's going to prolong things, and make it difficult. So let's make a deal. I will tell you right now how this works, but I need you to go on the Institute for Behavioral Training, which is ibehavioraltraining.com, and I need you to become a well-trained parent. So go on there, go into the parent section and start looking at those various modules and start heading through them, especially the challenging behavior stuff, because I need you to learn the techniques. The techniques are important. And here's why I'm telling you this. Because the first thing you have to do is you pick one of the behaviors, not every circumstance, just one, and you allow him to tantrum, okay? And that tantrum could go for 2 hours. And during that 2-hour time frame, I do not want you to reverse or give in or do anything that you normally would do. That's going to be the hardest thing for you. Because believe me, 5 minutes of your child tantruming, and I'm sure you know this, feels already like 2 hours. So when it's really a tantrum that's going on for a couple of hours, you are in bad shape as a parent. And I want you to be very empowered, and I want you to be really strong throughout that experience, which is why I want you to be trained. So that's it. The first thing you do is you select one thing, and I would probably, anything basic, just one command that you know he's not going to do, he's going to tantrum, and just let the tantrum wear out. Just let it wear out. Once the tantrum has calmed down, it could take 2 hours, then go ahead and interact with the child and try to prompt him to ask for whatever the object was, whether it's a break or it's an object, it doesn't matter, and then you give him the object and you reinforce it and you walk away. Do not have conversation about it. Do not talk about it when the tantrum is occurring or after. There's no conversation occurring here about what just happened. Do not try to teach him the lesson during this thing. This has nothing at all to do with the cognitive aspect. This is just behavioral. What you're doing is you are very clearly making it known to him that the tantrum is ineffective in this circumstance. That's all. That's all you're doing. And once he understands this tantrum is not working, he's going to want to know what will work to get the thing that he wanted. And that's where it comes in, and you give him the language. And the language is just, can I have this? Or can I take 5 more minutes? Or whatever it is that makes it fair. But do not give in to the tantrum. That's the #1 most important thing you can do. And because it seems like it affects many aspects of his life, that's why I'm saying pick one behavior at a time. By the time you do the, let's say, 4th one, he will have known. You won't even have to do it anymore. But the first behavior is going to be hard. The second one's going to be less hard, but still hard. Third one, he's going to figure it out pretty quickly. By the 4th time, he knows you just won't accept tantrums. That's how it goes. Go on the IBT website and learn all this stuff. It's very important because his tantrums are for different reasons. Sometimes it's because he wants something. Sometimes it's because he's avoiding something. And in each circumstance, you want to make sure that you're allowing the tantrum to just extinguish on its own, but you want to replace it with a different type of behavior. That's why it's important for you to get trained by IBT.
Is it unreasonable to think that a 10-year-old with a level 1 could be eligible for ABA?
So first of all, a level 1 is wrong. So there's always got to be 2 numbers. Okay. And a lot of times diagnosticians make this, I don't know why, make this mistake. So level 1, it either has to be level 1-1 or 1-2 or 2-1 or whatever. There's 2 numbers. There's 2 severity codes. And people just say level 1. Level 1 would indicate high functioning, but I don't know if this is a 1-1 child, which basically means that the child has very limited deficits in social communication and very few self-stimulatory behaviors. That would be a 1-1.
Okay.
If that's the type of child, then you're dealing with a very intelligent child who's minimally impacted by autism, and this stuff will be easier, as I said before, but also harder because our very high-functioning kids are very manipulative.
Right.
So it could go one way or another. But regardless, my tendency is to think kids who are very high functioning will manipulate you. You're very permissive parents. You will be manipulated. The very worst thing that could happen, and I'll say this again, the very worst thing that could happen that will make things worse is if you start the process and he tantrums and you give in.
Yeah.
If you do that, you have now strengthened his belief that tantruming will get you to back off. He will not let it go because he will have learned that ultimately, if a 5-minute tantrum didn't work, an hour-long one will. And what you've now accomplished is you've taught him to tantrum for an hour each time. So if you're not ready to do this, don't do it at all. This is not easy. I just want to say that. I am a behavior analyst and a psychologist through and through, and when my child used to scream at night because she wanted various things and I was not willing to go give it to her when she was a baby, I'd sit outside her room and cry. And so let me just tell you, it's not an easy procedure. Be prepared. Other ways you could prepare yourself is not to do it alone. Like, obviously, if you can get access to a team of people who are behavior analysts or behavior technicians or BCATs, or just help, like people around you, your spouse, your maybe a sister or a brother or someone who's helpful to take charge of the session, because this could go on for 2 hours, and I don't want you as a parent sitting there listening to your child screaming and crying and being aggressive for 2 hours. You need to also remove yourself, by the way, if the child gets aggressive, remove yourself from the room, just make sure your child doesn't elope. Right. And make sure they're safe in the room so that they can't harm themselves. Most of the time, the child's not going to, one child won't harm themselves. They're just going to try to bang on the door and get out and make sure you know how upset they are. And if you don't react to it in any way, that's going to die down sooner. But for moral support, it would be good to have someone who can help you and say, hey, okay, you go get a snack. I'll be here watching it on a camera. Video cameras are fantastic nowadays because you can always look and see what's going on in there.
But you got to make sure that the people on the team understand what the mission is and we're not
Absolutely.
giving in. Because
Absolutely.
if you have your mother-in-law there and
Yep.
she's like, this is terrible, you should give in,
Yep.
it's not going to help you. So, you know,
And it's just so simple. It's simple behavior analysis, you know, like he's communicating to you. And if you give in, you're saying, oh, I understood the communication, I'll give in. I'll do whatever you want.
Right.
What you have to do is act dumb. I don't understand your communication, so you can tantrum till tomorrow. I don't know what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
The only way I understand is if you speak to me.
Right.
And that's
In
it.
a
That's
calm
what you're trying to teach.
a calm voice.
Calm, nice voice. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's another very good point. You never want to accept a child screaming at you and say, oh, okay, well, he at least communicated.
Right. Right. Oh, it's so difficult. All right, we're going to take one last break and then we're going to be back to answer more questions. Stick with us.
What is autism?
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 I've been asking myself that for a very, very long time.
Let me think about that one.
Trying to, just,
Jeez. Let me think. Oh man, that's a rough one. Yes.
Autism is a neurological disorder that affects many of our kids in different ways.
It's a learning disability that affects the cognitive functions of the brain.
A lot of people have the misconception that it's a disability, and it's really not.
I look at it as like a special gift.
When one person thinks differently from another.
It's an opportunity for everyone to learn to understand someone that's a little different than them.
Autism is the ability to educate.
They're given so much talent in different areas.
To me, autism means a chance to be with and be around people you really care about. Autism is beautiful.
It's a way of seeing the world differently.
It's always unique, totally intelligent, and sometimes mysterious.
Happiness that comes out of my son's hard work.
It's a movement.
Unpredictable.
That's right.
Awesome. Love.
The field I want to work in.
Laughter, fun, joy. Autism is beautiful to me.
I want you to remember these 3 words. There is hope.
So with down dog, there are several different ways that you can do it, and I want to show you first and then help you with yours so that we can work on what feels good for you, okay? All right, because there's no right way to do it. It's more about what your body likes, right? So for me, what I'm going to do is start off with my hands at the top of my mat, my headlights. My fingers are aiming towards the top of my mat. And then I'm going to tuck my toes, and then my head is also going to drop, and I'm going to look between my toes. Okay? And my body should be, or hopefully, like an A shape. Or V, yes.
Upside down.
Yep. And so if your quads are tight or your hamstrings are tight, you might need to bend your knees a little bit.
Then it's you.
Or if your shoulders are a little strained or a little tight, remember to push in through your feet. But also sometimes what feels really good is going down on your forearms like this. You can actually start out this way instead, it's a little easier. So your forearms rest on the floor. You still tuck your toes, and then you're still looking between your toes. But rather than being on your hands then, your weight's along your hands and your forearms. Okay? All right. So, now it's your turn. Okay? So, yep. You're gonna do on your hands? Okay, yep. So your fingers are facing the front of the mat. Or are you doing forearms? Forearms? Okay, there we go. Wow, you're very bendy. Very nice. And your gaze is right here between your toes. Excellent. Very nice, Jem. Wow. Awesome. Feet are a nice distance apart. How does that feel?
Okay.
Awesome. You want to come down? Excellent. Good.
Welcome back to Autism Live and to Ask Dr. Doreen. Dr. Doreen Grandpichet is here with us, and she's answering your questions. I wanted to hop to a question, and I do want to just reference the fact that during last week's show, we want to give a shout out, Cindy Burns from, she had been on the Dr. Phil show
with me, that's right.
And she just wrote in a couple of things and said how right on the money you were about talking about behaviors. And then she also said, I just thought it was a great quote. She said, "We have to be our child's Annie Sullivan." Helen Keller's teacher to reduce the behaviors by giving Helen another way to communicate. And she was just in total agreement with what you were saying. And I just thought that was a fun thing that we'll bring that up. But I also...
Hi, Cindy.
What's that?
And hi, Cindy.
And hi, Cindy. So, and if those of you who haven't seen that Dr. Phil episode that Dr. Grandpichet was on, it's on YouTube, and you can Google it, Dr. Grandpichet and Dr. Phil, and it'll come up. But somebody wrote in a question: can you use ABA to decrease tics? For example, coughing, blinking, clearing throat, etc.
Yeah, you can use ABA to decrease anything that is in any way under a certain person under the person's control. So ABA, the definition of ABA includes the you can change behavior, and behavior is defined as anything that you can control, and it's basically is like the movement of a muscle that is voluntary. So nothing involuntary. So when we talk about tics, there's two ways to think about this, because some people think that certain tics are involuntary, and others think that no, actually you have some control over them. It's just that when you're doing other things, you're not focused on the tic, and therefore you are not able to control it. So one of the behavioral treatments for tics is to actually have the individual sit very calmly and gain awareness of their own tics first. So blinking being one of them. First of all, of course, you want to make sure, because a lot of people do that because they have other eye issues. Their eyes are dry, they're wearing contacts, whatever it is. But if it's nothing like that, or clearing throat or coughing or whatever it is, and there's no allergy involved with coughing or that kind of thing. So if it's purely a tic, which some of our kids have, then you have to, and depending on the functioning level of the child too, if they have too many other things they're dealing with, this won't work. But for them to become aware of it, and once they're aware of it, then it's very simple, because then all you do is you teach this is biofeedback, by the way. Biofeedback is a behavioral intervention, and what you do is you essentially establish a baseline. So the individual themselves can just do a click for every time the tic is occurring, right? and then you will have a number of times the tick occurred per minute. And you really don't want to do it more than, like, you need to just do very minimal short periods of time. And then what you do is you just literally tell the individual, try to do it less than that in a minute. Or don't do any until this clicker goes off, which is 1 minute. And so you are now shaping the individual's behavior. And if you can do this 2 minutes, 5 minutes, you increase it, and then over time, the individual gains control of the tics. Sometimes these things are too hard, they're too frequent, too common, there's too much other stuff. Sometimes there's neurological basis for it. All of those types of things have to obviously be controlled. People tend to tick more if they haven't had enough sleep. People tend to tick more if they're on various stimulants. So there's a lot of underlying, and I wouldn't want you to sit down and just try this unless you're certain that all the medical issues have been dealt with. And of course, there's also medical interventions for tics. So, you know, the most successful is always when you do both.
Okay, and good to know. I mean, I hadn't really thought about what the difference is between a tic and a stim, because we talk about stims all the time.
Very different.
Yeah.
So, you know, stims are a very fascinating thing. STIM stands for self-stimulatory behavior, which I always think that's a pretty bad name.
Yeah, it's a misnomer.
It is a very bad misnomer. In the field of ABA, we refer to self-stimulatory behavior as stereotypical behavior, which is better because we call it stereotypy. In the diagnostic manual, it's basically called stereotypical repetitive mannerisms, that type of thing. And that basically it's a huge array, it's a broad array of things, and it can be anything like, let's say, grunting, which would be the closest to a tic, or just making this sound, ee, I'm sure many people have, or to things like turning the lights on and off, to things like visually looking at something from the corner of your eye, to doing this, to doing this. These are all classified under self-stimulatory stereotypical behavior, and they're all very, very different. So again, to me, it's something that we just have not learned to ask more questions about. In my mind, some of the stuff that's self-stimulatory or we consider to be a stim is pain-related. I think the child is doing it to reduce pain. Some of it is just anxiety related, so the child is doing it in order to reduce anxiety. Some of it is just visual sensory input or auditory sensory input. A lot of our kids will do this type of stuff because they like the sound. The visual stuff, there's no question they're trying to see things differently. And we just simply don't know enough about even normal hearing and vision. Forget about how our kids perceive things in the world. You know, we've learned quite a bit from Temple Grandin's information, but not enough to know exactly why they are doing these things. And so that's kind of a little bit different. Tics are usually, at least as far as we know, tics can also be anxiety provoked, for sure. And the tendency for people is to think that tics are more originating in the nervous system rather than kind of like has more of a medical or biochemical cause than self-stimulatory behavior, which we believe is just becomes a habit because it's something that has been reinforced intrinsically. Like if you're doing this and it removes pain, you're going to keep doing this.
Yeah.
So that's the concept with self-stimulatory behavior. It's like reinforcement maintained outside. And with tics, it's more like maintained because of internal types of.
It's all
we don't know. We just don't know enough about these things. Yeah.
It's fascinating. We could talk about this endlessly, but your time is up, and I know we could keep you forever, but you have other things to do that are really super important.